Hello, I'm Pastor Kevin Conkle from the Metropolitan Community Church of the Palm Beaches. Today we're going to take a look for just a little bit about the plight of the African rainbow family and the continent of Africa. And my heart is heavy for them because they have a history of people being abusive to them, not only the rainbow family, but all the families of the earth in the slave trade and the plundering of gold and diamonds and oil and humanity from the African continents by other peoples that came in and robbed them. So the African continent has a deep place in my heart in studying Africa, and I think it's something that we as Europeans and Americans need to consider. We have a great debt to Africa because our species, the Homo sapiens, came from Africa. Every single person alive today have a relative that came from Africa. We are all born in the cradle of Africa and dispersed throughout the rest of the world from that nesting spot, that home spot where humanity came into fruition and evolved into Homo sapiens. But Africa, as of April of 2025, homosexuality is outlawed in 31 of the 54 African states. And that's a lot of states for it to be outlawed and criminalized. In fact, in states where homosexuality is actually legal, there is often little protection for discrimination against the rainbow family in areas of like employment, living. There's a lot of discrimination from the government. There's discrimination culturally. There's discrimination from the family. And unfortunately, there's discrimination from the church. In November 2006, though, a glimmer of hope, South Africa became the first country in Africa and the fifth country in the whole world to legalize same-sex marriage. That's quite a feat. Not only the first country in Africa, but the fifth country in all the world. South Africa was way ahead of the rest of the world. In May of 2023, the Supreme Court of Namibia ruled that foreign same-sex marriages entered into in other countries, when they came to Namibia, would be equally recognized to heterosexual marriages. Although it's not quite a resounding endorsement of same-sex marriage, it is a recognition that there is specialness to it. So there are some glimmers of hope in Africa, and we are thankful for those. But there is a lot of despair. We must pray for our rainbow family in Africa because they have a terrible burden to bear in most places. And most of it we, as Americans and Europeans, our ancestors, some of us currently have a role that we've played that is a negative role in the continent of Africa. A lot of the burden that happens in Africa on the rainbow family is a result of our European ancestors. Many African states that were once European colonies, they have laws criminalizing homosexuality. And a lot of those laws, could trace back to the colonial era when Christianity was brought in and forced upon them. And the ideas of certain European Christians on misogyny and homosexuality and lesbianism and transgenderism and those type of things, those attitudes that were negative were hoisted upon the African peoples. Even to this day, there are evangelicals that fly over to Africa from the United States and Europe, and they fan the flames of hate and fear and misunderstanding, and sometimes it even leads to the death of people in our rainbow family in Africa. This is truly a shame, and we are so very, very sad about this. Many of our European and American preachers and politicians have done our African siblings wrong. And we must atone for this, and we must change this. Some of the things can be done through prayer. Some of the things can be done like we're doing now, apologizing for our transgressions, apologizing for our siblings here in America sometimes bring over wrong information and wrongly spirited plans to try to lobby the governments to create more problems for the rainbow family, and go and talk to church leaders and try them to, in Africa, and try to get them to lobby their governments for more problems for our rainbow family. So much of this stuff has been really attributed to some Americans and Europeans, and of that, Africa, we're truly sorry, and truly sorry. But we do have a positive message for our African rainbow family that is true to the gospel of Jesus Christ, because there is someone who preached and taught some incredible lessons about inclusion and love. There was a Middle Eastern man whose skin pigment is a lot closer to many of theirs than it is to some of us Europeans and Americans. Our African siblings, as well as the whole world, can celebrate a liberation, a freedom that will stand against any government or cultural tyranny. We celebrate what God taught all of us, that when Jesus died on the cross, he nailed the Old Testament, the old rules, the old traditions to the cross. And he introduced the new law of love. It is the test that we all must look at. If it is of love, it is of God. If it is not of love, it is not of God. That is the test. And we celebrate that we know now that Jesus never once spoke ill of a same-sex love. We celebrate that Jesus healed a gay Roman soldier's lover and said that that gay soldier had the greatest faith that he'd seen in all of the Middle East. We celebrate that we know that the book of Corinthians mentions that people can enjoy their sexuality, but they should avoid excesses and not idolize the human form. We celebrate that we know that the book of Galatians says that God does not look at our gender, but God looks at our hearts. We celebrate that we know the book of Matthew that says there won't be any genders in heaven. And one of the greatest things I can say to our African family and to all of us, on this day, our African siblings, we celebrate that one of the first members of the early church was a black gay man who was known as the Ethiopian eunuch. I know times are hard in Africa. In church, we need to pray. We need to give money. We need to support the MCC in Africa and other organizations that help with the rainbow family and their causes. In Africa, you've had to endure so much at the hands of foreigners. However, it is time for Ethiopia and all of Africa to stretch forth their hands, to stand forth, raise your hands toward heaven, and see a reign of revival, of inclusivity and unconditional love that will quench the driest thirst in the driest land. Amen.